in honor of the releases of Alita Battle Angel and the French live-action City Hunter titled Nicky Larson. Some great friends of mine, including myself, are here to discuss some live-action adaptations of popular manga and anime. The very idea of creating such a thing seems to get a bit of a bad rap, especially with films like Netflix's Death Note, Fist of the North Star, and Dragon Ball Evolution. However, with live-action adaptations for My Hero Academia and Mobile Suit Gundam being in the works, as well as a Hollywood remake of Attack on Titan, we would like to celebrate a good handful of live-action adaptations that are actually worth your time, and I will go ahead and do the honor of starting us off. Space Battleship Yamato. Not only is this movie one of my absolute favorite live-action anime adaptations, it's also one of my favorite science fiction movies in general. It's set in the future where Earth's resources are nearly depleted, and as the title suggests, the Japanese battleship Yamato is rebuilt into a spacecraft to retrieve a device from a distant planet to save it. Everything from the special effects, the action, the music, the storytelling, and all the characters are done very well. As someone who has never seen the anime, this movie really makes me want to watch it, and I feel like that's when an adaptation does its job well. I feel that this is a movie anyone can enjoy, and if you're tired of all these so-so Star Trek and Star Wars films as of late, then I would definitely recommend Space Battleship Yamato from 2010. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure: Diamond is Unbreakable Chapter 1. I will go ahead and say that I was definitely having some doubts about this one before I saw it, and to my surprise, this was a really solid adaptation. I originally thought it was going to be awkward adapting only the first few episodes of Diamond is Unbreakable, but the filmmakers definitely took advantage of it and actually expanded upon them to where I appreciated it even more. I didn't care much for characters like Angelo, Josuke's grandfather, and Keicho Nijimura, but this movie made me love them even more, and took the opportunity to fully develop them. Even everyone else was great, like Josuke, Okuyasu, Jotaro, Koichi, Yukako, everyone. It may not be for outsiders, but as a fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it's definitely a must-watch. And it really shows how diverse of a director Takashi Miike is, and with Yoshikage Kira confirmed to be the villain for the sequel, I am really liking what I am seeing. Dragon Ball: The Magic Begins. Hey look, a live-action Dragon Ball movie that's actually good. I'm honestly surprised that not many people know about this movie. To put it short, it's Tokusatsu Dragon Ball from Taiwan, and it's pretty incredible. It definitely takes the source material more seriously, even if it comes off as being absolutely ridiculous. You can actually go and watch on YouTube for free with subtitles and everything. I highly urge you to watch this film because of its obscurity, and so people can be happy that there does exist a live-action Dragon Ball movie that definitely does not disappoint. Ichi the Killer, another one by Takashi Miike, and this movie really shows his love for violence. Ichi the Killer depicts the violent moments from the manga in a very gruesome manner to the point where it was actually banned in several countries. With that out of the way, Ichi the Killer is a very entertaining psychological action horror about a troubled man who is manipulated into attacking Yakuza members while also being pursued by Kakihara, who I'm pretty sure inspired Heath Ledger's Joker. As much as I recommend Ichi the Killer, just make sure you have a trash can nearby in case you're squeamish. Other than that, it's not one to miss, and I would especially watch it for its infamy. Riki-Oh, The Story of Ricky. Do you remember the Fist of the North Star live-action movie? Are you a fan of insane ultraviolence? Do you enjoy seeing some over-the-top ridiculous, flat-out ludicrous martial arts? You know, like what Fist of the North Star should have had? Then Riki-Oh is the perfect movie for you. Riki-Oh is by definition a literal live-action anime where it's just bonkers through and through with a bizarre story about a man who's virtually indestructible and limitless thrown into a prison, and it's so fun to watch. This film definitely deserves its cult status. Anyway, those are my picks. Let's hear what everyone else would like to say about their choices for live-action anime and manga adaptations they recommend.
City Hunter is a manga by Tsukasa Hojo that was later adapted into a popular anime series. Jackie Chan started a 1993 adaptation of the manga, directed by Wong Jing, after asking his Japanese fans which manga character they would like to see him play, and Ryu Seiba was selected. The film plays like whoever made it decided to only take the comedic elements of the manga and run with that, ignoring the drama aspects. In a sense, City Hunter isn't that great of an adaptation of the manga. It plays more like a sort of spoof of the series, along with elements of the James Bond franchise. However, that doesn't make it bad in my opinion. Yes, it's goofy and it's silly, but it's still a really fun, cheesy, and charmingly over-the-top movie that's really hard to hate on, and as per usual, the stunts and action sequences, as with any Jackie Chan film, are top tier. So overall, not a faithful adaptation, but a fun movie with a charming cartoon vibe to it. Mr. Mumble is a 1996 film that is an unofficial adaptation of City Hunter, meaning that the characters and situations are like the source material, but the names are changed. Unlike the Jackie Chan adaptation, Mr. Mumble decides to strike a good balance of comedy and drama, like the show and manga did. A lot of the moments and scenes from the film feel like they could have come straight out of the show. It's well directed, the action's great, and like the show, as I mentioned before, it perfectly balances the humorous and serious aspects that were present in the manga. As for casting, Michael Chow is perfect as Ryusei in my opinion. He has the physicality down, the humor down, and is overall very good in the role, and the supporting cast is pretty good too. Overall, despite me feeling that the Kaori XP could have been done a lot better, this is a solid adaptation. And taking into account this, the Chan movie, and the K-drama, it is currently the most faithful adaptation of City Hunter in live action, which is ironic considering that it's unofficial. Princess Blade is a reimagining of the manga Lady Snowblood. The setting has been changed from the 1800s to a futuristic, dystopic Japan. The story for the most part is pretty standard, at least with the character Yuki's side. Typical revenge type stuff, but it is punched up by the amazing choreography directed by none other than Donnie Yen himself. The fights are impressive and intense, and the lead actress Yumiko Sheku does an excellent job at all of her action scenes. In my opinion, the story was overall pretty good, but where I felt that the heart of the storyline was in Takashi's story. The character of Takashi, played by Hideki Ito, really was, in my opinion, the best part of the movie, and one that I felt the most invested in. My only real major complaint is its length. I really felt that it needed another 20 or so minutes to give what I feel would have been a proper and satisfying ending. Hell, I'd even settle for a sequel. I know this movie is nearly 20 years old now, but honestly, I would love to see a continuation of this story and a truly satisfying conclusion. One of the things I love about Go Nagai's character Cutie Honey is how versatile the character can be. She can be interpreted in a number of different ways, different art styles, and really any kind of writer so long as they're really creative. Hideki Anno's 2004 adaptation fuses the Cutie Honey character with a bit of tokusatsu and more of an over-the-top style of humor and characters. Like the Jackie Chan City Hunter adaptation, this Cutie Honey leans hard on the comedy side, maybe a bit too much at times to be considered a really faithful adaptation as many would hope. But in my opinion, as cheesy as it is, and sometimes because of it, it still has a charming little vibe to it. Yes, I would say it is silly, it is cheesy, and there are definitely other better adaptations of this character in other mediums, but I would still recommend this movie. It's wonderfully zany, it's very entertaining, and still a fun time to be had. Rurouni Kenshin is a manga created by Nobuhiro Watsuki that was later adapted into an anime. This anime is probably one of my favorites of all time, maybe even my favorite, so with an adaptation, I was hopeful after hearing all the positive buzz, but still a bit cautious. I wanted to look at it with a critical eye, but at the same time I knew I shouldn't be too harsh on some of the things that would be inevitably changed from the source material. While changes do exist to the sections that this story adapted, the final product is honestly really great. Everything about this really works. The characters are for the most part well done, their actors fit well into their roles, the music is good, the story is well done, and the swordplay is some of the best I have ever seen on film. Main thing I want to discuss is the lead actor for Kenshin Himura, Takeru Sato. He is honestly as close to a perfect live-action adaptation of this character that I think we can get. Everything from his mannerisms, voice, movements, and his physicality just screams Kenshin. In the same way that people talk about actors like Robert Downey Jr. and Christopher Reeve as being perfect fits for their comic book characters they portrayed, Sato is perfect as Kenshin. This is, in my opinion, the best live-action adaptation of an anime or manga that I have seen. It succeeds as a faithful adaptation that respects the themes and characters of the source material, while at the same time being great as its own film.
Hey there everybody, it's DaikaijuTony here, and it's good to be back.
It always bothered me on how a majority of anime fans assume that all live-action or Western adaptations of anime and manga are automatically bad. Then again, there was a time where superhero movies were mostly seen as disastrous, and while good video game adaptations are very rare, they are finally getting the proper treatment they deserve. For the most part. Now, let's get started with my picks. Parasite 1 and 2. Whenever an anime that is already complete is adapted into a single movie, story arches and some characters are usually left out because of the overall runtime of the movie. While Parasite is guilty of this, the producers were at least willing to have the narrative spread out into 2 movies. I don't want to spoil too much, but the plot essentially follows the story of the manga with the exception of a few characters and story arcs. Surprisingly, the CGI is great for a Japanese production. While the parasites do look a bit cartoonish, the way they slowly transform from the human head looks believable. The gore effects is also pretty convincing. The only aspect that is really improved upon, or at the very least give the movie its own identity, is the soundtrack, which is contrast to the anime's techno beat soundtrack. It's taken more seriously and builds tension when it's needed. Honestly, it bears more resemblance to Hans Zimmer's scores for superhero movies. Maybe if there was a third movie in between, there wouldn't be much problems with elements from the original source material being left out. I am a hero. What happens if a manga artist in his 30s whose life has reached rock bottom is faced with the zombie apocalypse? You get one of the most bloodiest and holy crap did that just happen adventures out there. Despite the ending and deaths of certain characters being altered since the manga wasn't even finished at the time, this could possibly be the most faithful manga to movie adaptation yet. Sure, there are changes to certain events, but a lot of it is played out shot for shot with the manga. If you're into movies based on manga and anime that plays an emphasis on the art form or just fun zombie movies, then I highly recommend this one. Battle Royale. While this is debatable on whether or not this counts or not, considering that the manga was based on a novel, you can't deny the cultural influences this movie had, for better or for worse. As the title suggests, the premise is about a bunch of junior high students being put onto an island where they are forced to brutally kill each other until there is one left. I, for one, don't want to spoil the rules of the game, since I'd rather have you see it for yourself to know how grounded they are. Takashi Kitano as the teacher is flippin' awesome. His menacing premise and intimidating sense of humor is more than enough to be casted as the highlight of the movie. But despite his cruel attitude, he managed to be a sympathetic character, which is made more impactful with its beautiful soundtrack. While the movie isn't as gory or explicit as the manga, what's in the R rating was good enough to make it Quentin Tarantino's favorite movie of all time. Oldboy. Now, for those who are wondering, Oldboy is a South Korean film that was based on a Japanese manga. Then it got pointlessly remade by Spike Lee. The movie only takes the premise of the manga, which is about a man being held in captivity for a long period of time with no explanation given to him, only to be released to take part in a game of life and death. But the movie completely changes the rest of the story into its own unique product. It's more of a noir thriller than an action flick, although it does have one of the most perfectly orchestrated fight scenes ever put on film that would influence hallway fights like the ones in Daredevil. The soundtrack is very intense, even adds more calmer tracks where you'd think there wouldn't be any tension being built. The story has themes and plot twists that would leave your jaw wide open, and dare I say it, isn't for the faint of heart. Unless you've already been spoiled by the remake, and in that case, I'll say it's done better here. Bottom line, this isn't just a great movie based on a manga, it's an amazing movie in general.
When I was asked to think of live-action anime adaptations to recommend, my mind immediately went to Death Note. Death Note is the story of a young college student named Light Yagami who finds a mysterious supernatural notebook that has the power to kill people depending on whose name you write in it. Light, wanting to make the world a better place, immediately starts using it to kill hundreds of criminals around the world and uses influence over the human race to act as its god under the name Kira. Of course, this brings the attention of a particular detective named L, who plans to bring this mysterious killer to justice. The manga was known for being an amazingly well-written game of cat and mouse between two insanely crafty individuals with very opposing interpretations on what justice is. The film manages to capture a lot of the intricacies of the original storyline, since, unlike a lot of anime and manga adaptations, this one isn't so reliant on special effects, save for Ryuk, the original owner of the Death Note, who follows Light around to enjoy the chaos he started. The film manages to make up an entirely new scenario for its climax in order to save its true ending for the second film. The scenario is actually quite brilliant in showcasing Light's ability to think multiple steps ahead and wonderfully depicts his turn to the dark side. Now, of course, we can't talk about the first Death Note movie without bringing up Death Note 2, The Last Name, a direct sequel that introduces Misa, a fan of Light's work, who manages to track him down and join him on his quest towards godhood through the use of her own Death Note. One of the most impressive things I can say about Death Note 2 is that it manages to take creative liberties with the original story by switching things around so that L, the most popular antagonist and debatably the most popular character in all of Death Note, sticks around till the very end. I actually see this as an improvement, since many fans weren't happy when he was later replaced by his two less interesting proteges in the second half of the manga. Other than that, the sequel provides more of the same dark fantasy detective drama that the first film provided, and caps things off in an appropriately bittersweet conclusion that questions whether Light and L's actions were justified. Both films are easily at the top of my list for best anime adaptations. Of course, it's not that much of a surprise since they were directed by none other than Shusuke Kaneko. That's right, the director of the Gamera trilogy himself. Next up is Edge of Tomorrow, alternatively known as Live, Die, Repeat. The film is a 2014 adaptation of the light novel and manga series All You Need Is Kill. The movie takes place in a world where humanity is at war with a race of aliens known as the Mimics. Here we follow Major William Cage, a member of the media relations department who essentially acted as a salesman for the army's new power armor and handled the PR surrounding the war. When Cage is forced into serving as an actual soldier on a failed invasion, he ends up killing a rare kind of mimic, one whose blood allows him to live the same day over and over again every time he dies. It is from here when we see Cage's journey from a cowardly non-combatant to a selfless and badass action hero, as he improves his skills with the help of the Army's best soldier, Sergeant Rita. Edge of Tomorrow provides amazing spectacle with its frantic combat scenes that makes you feel like you're right there in the middle of the war. Its use of repeated lives felt very similar to that of a video game, as Cage goes through a lot of trial and error in order to gain an advantage on the Mimics in very creative ways. The characters were also written in a very believable way, and the chemistry both Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt share is top-notch. It's such a shame though that this film ended up as a disappointment at the box office, as I think this film could have been remembered as a classic among other extraterrestrial sci-fi action films, such as Aliens and Starship Troopers. Apparently a sequel is in development as of the time of this recording, so now would be a good time as any to watch this film. Up next is Speed Racer. Now I know many have lambasted this film for being too silly, too over the top, and being nothing but eye candy, though as someone who grew up watching the anime on Cartoon Network in the 90s, that's pretty much all I ever wanted out of a Speed Racer movie, and that's exactly what I got. Speed Racer, an adaptation of the American version of Mach Go Go Go, is about a race car driver named Speed who aims to win the Grand Prix with the support of his family. That is, unless the corporate corruption of the racing world doesn't get to him first. The biggest criticism this film received upon its release were its visuals, as all of the races and car-on-car combat is all done with bright, oversaturated CGI animation. While I could understand how such a multicolored presentation could be an assault on the eyes, especially those with epilepsy, I never had an issue with the effects and loved how unabashedly over the top this world was. It was as if the Wachowskis had this idea to place real human characters in a cartoony and timeless world, similar to that of the Dick Tracy movie. It's surreal, but at the same time captivating. The downside though is that some of the CGI environments feel like they weren't fully rendered and look very distracting. Now in terms of the characters, they all give off a sense of charm and childlike innocence, with a bit of an adult edge here and there. The characters overall perfectly fit this world. Now this may sound strange, but I think Speed Racer overall is like the race car equivalent of Pacific Rim, in that both films feature tons of action, lots of imagination, a lot of nostalgia, and plenty of heart from the filmmakers themselves. So what exactly did I pick for my 5th live-action adaptation of a manga or anime? Why, more Death Note, of course! Back in 2016, I was quite surprised to learn that a new Death Note movie was made as a continuation of the first 2 films, with an entirely new story, new characters, and even a few returning ones. I suspect this was made to capitalize on the 2017 Netflix Death Note film that was probably in production at the time. Taking place 10 years after Kira's defeat, 6 more Death Notes have been simultaneously released into the human world, as ordered by the King of the Death Gods, in order to find the next Kira. Eventually, a cyber-terrorist named Chien claims to be the next Kira, as he attempts to collect the remaining 5 Death Notes through any means necessary. Now, the only ones who can stop him are detectives Mishima and Ryuzaki from the newly established Death Note Task Force. One of the things I enjoyed from this film was seeing the natural progression of the film's universe and how different people handled the use of their own Death Notes. With Interpol already knowing everything there is to know about how the Death Notes work, there's a much greater emphasis on the task force side of things, leading to a greater focus on our contrasting protagonists. The film seems to go for this buddy cop pairing, as we have Mishima, a by-the-book law enforcer, constantly butting heads with the eccentric and aloof Ryuzaki, who would often ignore Mishima in order to follow his own plans and schemes. It's a pretty standard setup that eventually takes very interesting twists and turns by the end. Unfortunately, some of these plot points do result in several rehashed ideas from the previous films and manga, which is the film's biggest detriment. On the plus side, given that this plot was no longer a strict adaptation of the manga, it flowed at a decent pace and didn't feel like a bunch of rushed scenes that were adapted from the source material, which has happened to a lot of anime adaptations. It takes a lot of courage to try and make a follow-up to the original masterpiece that was the struggle between L and Light. While Death Note Light of the New World doesn't come anywhere close to the perfection of that story, it's still a very decent and well-made fantasy crime thriller that has opened the doors for potentially more stories in this universe. As an honorable mention, I'd like to bring up L Changed the World, a spin-off that focuses on L's last days shortly after the climax of Death Note 2. Its villains are pretty generic and the pacing can get sluggish at times, but if you enjoy the character from the manga, anime, or films, and you're a die-hard Death Note completionist, I'm pretty sure you'll get a kick out of this film. Thanks everybody for listening, and a big thanks to TitanGoji for letting me be a part of all this. Until next time everybody, take care.
A honorable mention goes to the Gatchaman live action, which honestly isn't a bad movie. Sure, it has its iffy moments like some of the CG work and its somewhat predictable plot, but it feels like an actual adaptation of the original anime with the modernized designs and story. It's probably the closest thing we'll ever get to a big budget Super Sentai movie.
My honorable mentions go to Ghost in the Shell and the Attack on Titan duology. I want to take this time to talk about them because I feel like they don't really get the credit they deserve and are pretty underrated in my opinion. Besides, I already talk enough about the live-action Attack on Titan on my channel, so you can check out my videos on those films if you're interested. As for Ghost in the Shell, it's not a bad film. The visuals are great, it does stand on its own pretty well, and the controversy surrounding it is just unnecessary. Anyway, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Dr. Mifune, DaikaijuTony, and KaijuNoir for being part of this. Feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and definitely don't forget to check out Dr. Mifune, DaikaijuTony, and KaijuNoir and subscribe to them as well. And feel free to comment your choices for live-action anime and manga adaptations people should watch. I also want to take this time to announce that I'll be taking a break from producing weekly content for now, and if you've been watching me for a while, don't worry, because I have something very special planned for May. And as soon as I'm finished with it, I'll go ahead and produce weekly content as usual. So until next time, take care everybody.